Hello and good morning, and welcome to today's webinar. Cloud technology has a lot going for it, and many organizations expect a reduction in costs, added flexibility, and increased resilience, to name just a few of the advantages when moving into the cloud. Planning is, however, everything, and at least if you want to harvest all the expected benefits, avoid the pitfalls, and reach your strategic goals. Today's webinar is all about that. Jens Christian Voldhøj and René Lykkeskov from CGI will address some of the essential issues to consider when embarking on your cloud adoption journey. Before Jens Christian and René begins, I'd like to make a few comments of a practical nature, however. First and foremost, feel free to ask any question that comes to mind in the chat window. We will be able to see your questions in the studio, and I will post them to the presenters when we have the time to do so during the webinar. But the other attendees will not be able to see your question or your name for that matter. So don't be shy and do not worry if your grammar is perfect or if you manage to phrase the question just right. So fire away. And if we do not have the time to ask all the questions that comes in, we will send them to the presenters who will reach out to you directly. So no question will be lost. Furthermore, later today, we will send a link to the recording of the webinar. So if you have to step out for a moment or the phone rings or whatnot, you'll be able to watch it all over again. But let's get on with the exciting part. First, René Lykkeskov from CGI will discuss what makes the journey to the cloud successful and how to ensure that the cloud supports your strategic goals. So, René. I know he's here somewhere. We just have to turn him on.
And thank you for the great introduction here. I will just share my screen. So just a second, you should be able to see it now. As Michael mentioned here, we have divided the session for today into three main topics. First, we will dig into and talk about the cloud adoption journey and how that is linked to the strategies within your organization and company. Then we will jump over to see how is it actually we can work with a lot of these topics related to cloud by building a cloud center of excellence and let that organization be part of the driving force in going to the cloud. And we will end up by discussing the value of regulatory compliance, one of the big tasks that is a huge challenge for a lot of companies across industries all over the world today. So how can we turn all of that compliance work into some kind of business value? So, but before we start with the presentation, just a few words on Jens Christian and I. Jens Christian is director within CGI and works as our Scandinavian cloud practice lead. It means that 24/7 Jens Christian is discussing with other cloud experts within CGI and across our client base on all kinds of cloud issues, from technical stuff to compliance to strategy and how we can help the clients. And that work covers, of course, Scandinavia, but also in a North European area. We talk more or less not daily, but at least weekly with Germany, with the UK, with Finland, with Germany, and of course Denmark, Norway, and Sweden from Scandinavia. Jens Christian has been, I think, 22 years or so within the CGI family and has a lot of experience both from a business and a technical point of view. Myself, René Lykkeskov, I've been with CGI for a couple of years and have used the last 7 to 8 years working in different kind of settings related to cloud, everything from building cloud infrastructure to cloud as a software as a service companies. And for the last couple of years within CGI with business development and also in that the context with mergers and acquisitions. So let's jump into the first part of the presentation here that we call the successful cloud adoption journey and how you can reach your strategic goals. Before that, I will just give a short introduction for those of you who are not that familiar with who CGI is. We are a huge company, as you can see here, with a lot of years in our knowledge base, founded in Canada in 76. We are as you can see, a huge company with 400 locations across 4 countries. We are 76,000 consultants that work with IT in all kinds of aspects across all industries, for our clients. We have not only consultant services and infrastructure and managed operation services, but we have also, together with our client base, built more than 190 IP-based solutions that serves clients across the public sector, finance, life science, manufacturing, and a lot of other industries where we have developed together with our clients IPs and software that is used all over the world today. From a Scandinavian point of view, we have 30 offices across the 3 countries. We are just above 5,000 members, and we call them members, not employees, since that most of the employees here, we are actually also shareholders in the company, and that is why we are called members. And from that point of view, I can tell you that 96% of the employees in Denmark, they are actually shareholders in the company. So that is why we have this culture of being shareholders and members at the same time. We work actively with what we call client satisfaction. We ask our clients to score us in the client satisfaction survey again and again and again, and on our scale from 1 to 10, and an average right now in Scandinavia, we are at 9.0, and that is actually quite high, since a lot of our clients actually also say that, well, by principle, we never give 10, so the highest you can get from us is 9, so being at 9 and an overall scale is actually quite good. From a cloud point of view, we are actually just counted up how many of our consultants in Scandinavia in some aspects work with cloud projects right now, either as software as a service or as consultants or regulations or developers or operations or whatever. So more than 2,000 of our 5,100 members are actually actively involved in some kind of cloud projects right now, whether it is hybrid cloud, public cloud, or a private cloud. And as you can see here, we embrace that we have in Scandinavia a huge focus on the Microsoft Azure platform, on Google and AWS as the Amazon platform, where we are partners and have a close cooperation with those as cloud vendors. And when we talk about cloud, the market of cloud is moving to what we call a mix of clouds. Some years back, we were very distinct that we called it private cloud, we called it public cloud, we called it hybrid cloud. But what we can see is that for almost all of our clients, this will be a mix. It will not be an either or. It will be a mix of having services either in some kind of private cloud setting, combined with your own infrastructure, and some kind of hybrid where there's a mix of your own infrastructure and your own data center, or across public and private clouds, or it is in the pure public cloud. And that, of course, gives the whole setting that you want to, let's say, decentralize your infrastructure and your applications spread all over, let's say, the globe, and you actually don't know where they are. It means that the data is moving around, and that gives, of course, a quite complex setting, but also a lot of decisions you need to make related to a strategy, related to how you organize around your cloud, and especially also how you will handle the compliance and regulatory topics. So that is why we have put up the agenda for today like this. Before we jump into what is it actually that we want to empathize with the planning part that Michael said, that a lot of the success comes from doing the right planning on your cloud adoption journey. And here we have just listed a couple of those cloud drivers that we meet when we talk to you clients and say, well, what is it actually you want to achieve? That is one of the first things you need to challenge yourself with. What is it actually? What kind of business benefit, what kind of technical benefit is actually we want to achieve when we talk about cloud? And let that be the drivers for your cloud journey. And here I just mentioned some of those: agility for the business, innovation, stable operations, cost and elasticity, security, also being able to attract the new talents that we actually work in the cloud, that makes it, let's say, more modern, and that is actually something that all the new employees, they expect, that they get the possibility to develop themselves working in the cloud. But that is also the positive things. But when we then look into and add the risk to the drivers and say, but why it is not just doing it then? And what is it that is stopping all of our clients in moving to the cloud? Or why are they not just doing it? And here we have put up a couple of those that we will also talk about later in the presentation. And here we talk security, we talk setting up the network, we talk of course a lot about the regulatory parts and the legal stuff, how to handle the operations and the culture. And just to mention the operations, still many think that, well, cloud that runs by itself, so I just take my MasterCard, pay for the software as a service, and then I'm up and going. But you need to know that cloud and operating is still two things that you need to be very aware of. You need to be in control of your operations. There will still be integrations, there will still be monitoring, there will still be tickets that need to be handled. So cloud is not just running by itself. You need to think how you will integrate the cloud into your existing IT operations. So this is just some of the drivers and the risk that we look into. So in CGI, over the last couple of years, we thought, how can we actually structure the work to help the clients achieve these business drivers, cloud drivers, and also how to handle the risk that they will meet on the journey. And what we have come up with over the last couple of years is that we have built what we call the cloud adoption framework. And the cloud adoption framework is built on the very traditional, that most of you maybe know, plan, build, run operating model. And we have then looked at that because that is the wording, that is the way we know to read. What do we do in the planning phase? What do we do in the building phase? And how do we then run what we come up with from an IT point of view? And we have put in some topics that we need that all of you as clients at some point in time in your cloud journey, you will need to dig into these topics that we have here. For instance, in the planning phase, you need to think about how will I adopt the cloud and how will I link the cloud to our strategy, the IT strategy and the business strategy and the other strategies. How will I handle the compliance part? What do I need to make of decisions related to the technology, to the vendor, to the platform, to the architecture, to the security? How do I look at my existing application portfolio and decide what should I move to the cloud and what is definitely not an option to move to the cloud? How do I organize myself with all the governance that is needed related to the Cloud Center of Excellence? That is just some of the topics that we dig into in the plan part. And then when we move to the build part, we say we must set up the infrastructure, and infrastructure in the cloud, that is infrastructure that is code. So that means that I don't have the physical servers, I have outsourced that part. So I need to talk to my infrastructure by code. And that is another way of working that is definitely very, very different from just opening the door to your basement and then look down and see all my Windows servers or mainframes in my basement. We need to talk about how do I actually build a way to migrate new existing infrastructure or applications to the cloud, and also to dig into what is cloud native, the security and stuff like that. And then we move to the run part, where I say we need to, how will I actually run all of these new services, the new applications? Should that be done in a hybrid context? Will I have to move data from the cloud to my existing on-premise infrastructure and back and forth? And how do I set up with the monitoring, the security, the all of that? And how do I actually secure that the cost related to the cloud is in control? So that is things that we dig into. And this framework here, that is not something that you do need to start from page 1 and then end at the last page and follow on a strict road. This is a pick and choose model. A pick and choose model where we can help you as clients with whatever where you are on your cloud journey and dig into whether, let's say you would ask us to help you with building the Cloud Center of Excellence, then we can open that box. And in these boxes, we have tools, we have processes, we have document templates that can help us on the journey. And that way of talking to the cloud, that say that no matter if you choose Azure, Amazon, Google Cloud, the CGI private cloud, or the Gov Cloud if you're in the public sector, it doesn't matter. That is just the technology. But on top of that, we can work with you on the plan, build, and run. This is just to say what I just have in some kind of summarize of what this will give us when we talk about the plan, build, and run part. And as you can see when you look into this, that no matter what, if you say plan, if you say build, if you say run, I have the last topic on that said it will in any way give us new ways of working that is different from the way we have maybe worked for the last 10, 20, or 30 years with IT and in the IT and business perspective. How do I then move from a business strategy to talk real cloud adoption. So this is a very traditional way of talking. We have the long-term planning with the business strategy from a corporate strategy point of view that is then moved down to what we call the midterm planning horizontal, where we have strategic plans, and from that we go to the short operating plans, and we have the project plans, the programs that we run to achieve the strategic plans that support the business strategy. Probably all know about that journey. But what we then dig into here is that you all have an IT strategy, and what we need to take the best of the IT strategy and take that together with the midterm planning and build a cloud strategy. As then you can see when you look here at the IT strategy and the cloud strategy, it's the same topics that we need to address. So we don't need to, let's say, reinvent everything from a strategic point of view, but we need to dig into say what is it actually we have with our IT strategy relating to our development processes, to our data center infrastructure, to procurement, security, compliance, operating model, and all of these stuff. That is the same topics we need to address from a cloud point of view. So in that sense, what we need to do into here is what is it that makes cloud different? So we don't need to build everything from start, but we need to look what we have and say, what does the cloud mean to this? And what is it we need to change? And what kind of new activities do we need to set up for that part? And then we must let, and we do, if we do it in that way, then it will probably very fast be a discussion about IT and technology. But what we want to do to move fast ahead is to make this use case driven and business focused. So we need to identify at a very early stage what is the business project that we want, what is the business benefit we need to want, what is that we want to achieve, and what kind of initiative from the business do we have that we can have as first mover projects. And here's just a couple of the headlines that we have with some of our clients. Fraud detection and anti-money laundering, self-service for business and development, modern workplace, modern data platform, new ERP system, whatever. But identify the project from the business that will be the one where we build the cloud strategy around, so that you don't start to go into a process where you want to have all the strategic decisions made and then move into the business and say, now we are ready. You need to go and find the business project and let that be the driver for building your cloud strategy. When we then dig into the plan build and the adoption and strategy part, we have here what we call the three main things we need to work with in the adoption and strategy part of our cloud adoption framework. And that is what we call the business definition, the strategy and the roadmap, and the operating model. And these headlines that we then have is again emphasizing that we want to do. Identify your business case and the drivers and build your cloud strategy around that. At day one, start to work what we call in a risk-based model by saying we know that there will be a lot of risk when we go to the cloud. So let's identify the risk every time when we look at the outsourcing of the service, of the application, of the infrastructure, of whatever we are going into. Then let's score the risk. Let's handle the risk. Let's find out how we can mitigate the risk if that risk occurs. And also from a starting point, discuss with your business, discuss with IT, discuss with your management, how ready are we, and in some kind, how mature are we to go into the cloud, and I will come back to that shortly. Then also from day one, start to build your strategy around the cloud principles and the policies you need to follow across your organization. Meaning that make some high-level first cloud decisions. For instance, do we want to go for a single cloud? Do we want to go for multi-cloud? Do we want to say that most of our what we need is already, let's say, within Amazon, within Asia? So do we have to go with that first and build our cloud setup in Asia or Google or whatever, or Amazon, and then move to the next cloud afterwards? So these high-level directions, so you get some guidance, and based on that, you can then start to build your transformation roadmap and put that into your cloud strategy. And also very early in the start, look into how your existing operating model is. How are your roles, responsibilities built across your IT organization and towards your support functions and to the business, and see how will this affect the cloud, so that you start to update your operating model with all the cloud topics. And that means that you need to go into this strategize, where you build your cloud strategy, your operating model, and the transformation roadmap. And having this roadmap from day one is an excellent tool. It will be a roadmap that will follow you for several years, where you need to update it, but have that as a one page or a couple of pages that you can use for discussion and say, what is it we are working with, what have we done, and what comes next in the next quarters, half year, or years to come for the cloud transformation journey. So you have a guidance in the way you work. When you then, in the cloud adoption, you will meet several challenges and risks. And I've put in here a 2019 model from Gartner that I actually think is a quite good way of looking at when you move to the cloud. In the one of the axes, you have what we call the resolution responsibility in the corporate IT function. And the other, we have the significance. And what Gartner has done here is, this is specifically related to public cloud, but it can be just as well in a hybrid cloud and a private cloud context. It doesn't really matter. They have put in the main risk that they have identified when you move into the cloud. And what I like about this is, whenever you take a new cloud service, a new cloud application, new cloud infrastructure, or whatever, challenge yourself with looking at this or a similar illustration, and challenge yourself and say, what does this mean for my decision? What does this mean for my service level agreements, for my data logging, for my performance, for my data leakage, for my security governance? And all of these, that is topics just as a remembering list. Challenge yourself at if I take this cloud service into production, what does it mean? So some key topics to remember here. It can be this one, it can be someone else. There's a lot of that out of the big Google internet to find that can help you, that you have a remembering list, that you challenge yourself with whenever you should make a new decision and outsource something to the cloud. Look at this and challenge yourself. How will this affect my decision? What will this mean to my way of working? And so that I focus on getting the benefits and mitigating the risks. Back to the cloud adoption framework, that is also a good tool where you say, but yes, we can see where we are going, but how mature am I in our organization? That will also give me some kind of guidelines. What kind of challenges will I meet? And again, here, this is the CGI model for scoring the adoption maturity, but there's, just to show you, there's a lot of models out there. Gartner, Accenture, Deloitte, IDC, whoever has their own models. It doesn't really matter which one it is, but it is an excellent tool also to discuss with your business and between business and IT support functions. What is it actually you want to achieve when we look at our business drivers, our use cases? So what is it we want to achieve, and where do we actually think we are today? That's actually quite followed by some good design, because that will give us input to the challenges we will meet. And of course, if the business expects us to be within the next 3 months, let's say let's take the cloud adoption maturity model at the top right. Let's say we want to be as fast as possible, be into the optimization model, the stage 4, to take that. Then that actually means that we need to have a lot of things in place before we can do that. And if we are maybe not even at stage 1 yet, or going to stage 1, then there are some things we need to do as the road goes by, and that is main topics we need to address as part of the transformation roadmap, as part of the cloud adoption journey. So use the cloud adoption maturity model. Pick one and use that for discussions to set your level of ambition, so that level of ambition can be put into the cloud strategy that then can be developed in your cloud adoption framework, and you can get the setup that you really need. Moving to the next, how do we then actually advise our clients to work with a cloud adoption strategy, so that they from day one can focus on creating business benefits, and then don't lock themselves in the basement in a specific room there where on the door is set, this is the cloud adoption program that sits in here, and then 2 years back then come up and say, we have solved every problem and now we are ready. That is not the way to go forward. You need to involve your full organization, identify your sponsors, your stakeholders, define a clear mandate and the roadmap for the deliveries, and also a clear communication plan, so that you are open about the progress and open about the challenges we meet. And that initial project for the cloud adoption journey must, if any way possible, report to someone at the CXO level, or maybe the CXO level as a whole. So the program director or project manager that is put in front of creating the cloud strategy reports to the top level in the organization. Then when this is set, then you move to the base, set the baseline, meaning be clear, identify, prioritize the business cases and the drivers, analyze where you are, the baseline, and do that by using this cloud adoption maturity model in the organization, and then assess the current situation to be very clear where we'll meet challenges. Then, based on that, go out to the business side and the IT, conduct interviews and workshops, and collect a lot of input that you really need, and get your ambassadors within your different business stakeholders, so that they can give input, and we can align the business strategy and the IT strategy, and focus on identifying quick wins, so that you already in the first quarter of running your cloud adoption strategy can show the first progress that makes it interesting for the business to also be sponsors for the way you work. Then there is a lot of documentation and organizing to do, and the way to handle all of this is actually to build the Cloud Center of Excellence. And the Cloud Center of Excellence will be the next topic for today that Jens Christian will go into. What is our advice and what is our experiences is using a Cloud Center of Excellence as the way to drive the full cloud adoption journey. And based on that, then we have the first version of the cloud strategy and the roadmap ready that we can go out. And then also when we have that, let the CXO level communicate the cloud strategy to the whole organization, so that you always, when you work with the cloud, can say, well, this is actually funded, decided, and supported by our CXO level, and that was communicated by this memo or this meeting and stuff like that. The communication part for the top management is essential to achieving the success and the progress. Else, our experiences is there will be a lot of small coffee meetings where we try to do the best. So we need the clear push from the CXO level, and then you can execute on the cloud strategy. So this is just a high-level 6-step process that we actually run. So at the end point here, from my final for the first part of this, then let's challenge ourselves. Why is it that so many of cloud projects, they fail? Or in other words, what is it that stop our clients from getting what we call the license to operate in the cloud? And here we have put up 5 topics that we see again and again and again. And that is that we jump directly into building infrastructure in the cloud without any cloud adoption strategy, without any business drive, without any sponsors from the business. And then the cloud strategy or the cloud adoption will turn into an infrastructure project, where we sit and develop infrastructure for the purpose of infrastructure and not for the purpose of the business. Then we also see, and we'll come back to that also later today, how big importance to be compliant actually means, not only GDPR compliant, but also compliant related to the industry standards. Huge topic and a huge challenge, but it is solvable. Then we also meet again here that we don't organize us in the right way, and we don't build a governance model that take care of the main stakeholders, and that is external stakeholders and internal stakeholders. So we'll come back to that also. And then again, the 4th highlight here is, from day one, think about how what you do in the cloud will be operated. And that you have let's say, a traditional infrastructure operation department, take them into account from day one, build the competences, look at the processes, and invite them into the project so that they can see that they are still needed in many years to come. And then at the last point, there is new ways of working that we call DevSecOps or DevOps or Agile or whatever we call it. It is a new way of working when you build infrastructure, because you need to code it, and that gives us a lot of other challenges. So our main takeaway here is that cloud is actually not a technology issue. That is not technology that stops us from moving to the cloud. Mostly it is all the other 5 things that is. It is very seldom that we meet actually things that we can't do in the cloud. Or if we look at the roadmap from the main cloud vendors, we can see that they on the roadmap are actually moving more and more of their technology into the cloud. So if we can't solve it today, then we will probably be able to solve it tomorrow or the week after. And based on that, I will lead over to you, Michael, and any questions if anyone has raised up here.
Thank you, René. And actually, we have a couple of questions, which is usually the best sign there is. One of them is, dear René, thank you for the presentation, and I concur. I got a question regarding the topics cloud security / cloud compliance. What are the differentiators regarding security / compliance when comparing Google Cloud versus GovCloud?
Google Cloud and GovCloud is actually just two different technologies, two cloud vendors. The GovCloud is the Danish version built for our governmental departments that makes it in a secure environment. They offer infrastructure that the ministries, the agencies, and other of the public organization can use, where IT-styrelsen, as it is called in Denmark, they are go steps in as a cloud vendor. So from a security point of view, from a compliance point of view, you need to do the same. You still need to be in control of what you of your outsourcing. So you need to ask yourself the same risk. How is that handled? And of course, some of this is just, let's say, GovCloud, we just offer your Kubernetes platform or whatever, and then you can move your infrastructure and your applications into that. But it is still GovCloud that needs to secure that the operating is running and the governance is let's say in place. But as a whatever, if in the public or in the commercial world or the private world, you need to be in control. So you can never outsource the responsibility for being secure compliant. You need to be in control. You can outsource the task, but it is in the end still your responsibility to be compliant and secure, no matter whether you choose Amazon, Azure, GovCloud, or whatever cloud vendor. I don't know if
So basically you can outsource whatever, but you still have to keep your seatbelt on, and you have to keep your hands on the wheel yourself.
You
basically
need to be able to look your executive board in the eyes and say, I will put my hand on the hot plate and say, I know I am compliant by using this service in the cloud or moving my infrastructure to the cloud. I'm in control. I have processes that secure that I'm in control. I have looked at the risk and I have put up mitigating actions for the risks. You can never outsource that part. You can outsource the job that needs to be done, but never the responsibility for it.
Safety first.
Yes.
I have another question here for you, René. What is your opinion, in your opinion, on the public sector's entities using Google Cloud for education purposes with children as data subjects? It sounds evil, but I don't think it is. Do you see any issues, concerns, or any serious problems with that? What alternatives exist already by now?
Again, and no matter which of the cloud vendors you use, whether it's Google, Amazon, or Microsoft, they are all based in America. And US is what we call, from a compliance point of view, a third part country, meaning they are not part of EU. And that means that all of the compliance stuff related to that need to be covered from a security point of view, from a compliance point of view. And there are challenges right now related to some of the rulings that the EU has come up with related to GDPR, or also the Schrems 2 case that we will dig into at the next topic. Now the next again. So this with what Schrems 2 will be a topic that we will come back to, where I think we can go more into detail with these questions.
Okay, excellent. One short question before we move on to Jens Christian. In short, how do you make sure that you cover all the risks that's part of a cloud journey, and which risks, would you say that organizations tend to forget?
That's actually a good question. Thinking fast here, I say the way that we help our clients is that we have built a set of questions. I think we now have in our risk assessment model more than 300 questions that you need to ask your cloud vendor or your cloud supplier how this is handled, and that covers everything from from being secure to have external auditors to look into the infrastructure, to security, to operations, to the right skills, to the right processes. So we have built what we call the questionnaire with more than 300 questions that can be used for the single decision. A lot of them is not in any way of scope, but we have collected across a lot of clients what questions have we helped our clients answer, so that we know that we stay in control. So we have this that we call our pool of questions that we use to secure that. But if I dig into that and say what is the one that we usually see many forget, my thing is that we underestimate the part of being compliant, how big a work that is. And the second is that we too often forget the operations part of the cloud journey. And that means that now we work in our cloud adoption program, let's say within anti-money laundering or whatever it can be in the financial sector, and we build the project, we select the cloud vendor, we do all the risk assessment, and we move ahead and we make the contract to procurement and legal. And then we are more or less ready. And then we contact our operations department and say, we have a new project that we want to move into the cloud. We want to go into the cloud within the next 2 months. Are you ready to take over the operations? And they look at us and say, we have no clue what you're talking about. We should have been part of this journey from day one if you want us to help with the operations. So I think that is maybe the thing where we can see a lot of things where we don't invite the operations people early enough into the process.
Okay, so don't forget operations. That's a good point. Okay, thank you so much to you for now. I know you'll be back in a short while, and right now I want to give the word to Jens Christian, which will talk about how to prepare your organization with a Cloud Center of Excellency. And Jens Christian, you were there for a short while and then you disappeared. Yep, I can see you.
Let me just need to share the screen as well. Hello all, my name is Jens Christian Wolfer. I'm going to present a bit about the Cloud Center of Excellence and how to do that. So let's start with the definition of a Cloud Center of Excellence. See if this works. So what is a Cloud Center of Excellence? So a Cloud Center of Excellence is a cross-functional team with executive support who's responsible for managing the cloud strategy. So the guidelines you have in your strategy, so they're responsible for implementing that. And they're also responsible for developing reusable assets, governance, and best practices. So it actually helps the business and the IT and the business or the organization to transform into to the cloud. So that's the overall definition of a Cloud Center of Excellence. If you look at the benefits of Cloud Center of Excellence, then the whole idea of having a Cloud Center of Excellence is enable you to accelerate your projects going into the cloud. So especially a large organization have a huge benefit of having a Cloud Center of Excellence because if you have hundreds of projects going into a cloud, it makes it so much sense to try to build and make it easier for the projects to adopt the cloud. So they don't need to redo stuff again and again, but you kind of focus on building these reusable components. By doing that, you're also removing a lot of the uncertainties and that many of the projects will have in regards to going to the cloud. So if you upfront have defined your compliance rules, your security rules, and so forth, you are much more reliant. It's so much easier to adopt the cloud going forward. You also centralize the key competences on the cloud, so you're enabled to have the evangelism and the education of people going out to the cloud people in your organization. So you kind of align that as well. And then, of course, standardization is probably one of the key items when you talk to cloud about cloud going forward. And then you also enable that you have one unit that is handling all the compliance and the security, so the rest of the organization have one place of shopping going forward. And all in all, it's actually helping realizing the full potential of the cloud. So what are the 10 core tasks of the Cloud Center of Excellence. I've touched upon some of them, but of course, helping to create the roadmap and strategies could be one of the things. If you decide to have a Cloud Center of Excellence implement before you have your cloud strategy defined. I know that René said that would come on a later stage, and that's also how we see it quite often. But sometimes we also see that you create the Cloud Center of Excellence, the team before, and then they help also define the roadmap and also the strategy around the cloud. Then they should help define all your policies, your principles, and your guardrails. So that's all the rule sets for the projects going into the cloud, so they know what to follow. So it's kind of like checklists that they know. A policy could be avoid vendor login. It could be cloud first. It could be so you kind of give the general guidelines in terms of what is required for all the projects going into the cloud. Then you need to help build all the reusable assets, and assets could be everything from scripts to templates to other stuff that makes it easy for each of the projects to onboard. You also build frameworks. It could be a security framework, so you actually have all the checklists in terms of what needs to be in place from the security side, and that makes it so much easier with these frameworks. It could also be on an operational framework or compliance framework, so then you have the checklists for the projects to go through when they need to build the applications in the cloud or solutions in the cloud. Then they should build and maintain the governance model, the processes, the guidelines, and the best practices for the journey. And they also need to help with the security and help with the compliance risk, and also whitelisting all the different technologies that you'll see or need for the cloud adoption. They should define your reference architecture, and they should also help having that reference architecture implemented, so you have a ready platform for all the projects going into the cloud. So they don't need to consider how should I architect a domain platform, but that's already done for me, and it's ready for me to roll in my projects going forward. Then of course you should educate and do the knowledge sharing with the rest of the organization, and keep up to date with new cloud technologies, and of course all the new cloud technologies, and that's moving fast. So you kind of also all the time need to go back and do updates of your everything from policies and principles to also the best practices and so forth. So having a Cloud Center of Excellence is not just a one-time event. It's something that you need to maintain over a long period, never ending. Then of course it's also nice to have someone in the organization being the evangelist and advisor on these cloud projects. So that's the role of the Cloud Center of Excellence. If we look at how this could be governed, then our recommendations is that you have an executive committee as a steering committee, and that's extremely important because they need to help you make the right decisions. They also need to give you the mandate to enforce the decisions, and also they kind of need to help you with implementing and making sure that the adoption in the rest of the organization is also done according to the rule sets that you put out. Then you have that's the executive committee, but you also have like a cloud program management board, that you can call that the steering board, and of course they are handling or helping with all the more operational parts in terms of also defining the roadmap of the applications going into the cloud, the onboarding process, and helping out in the stakeholder management and so forth. All this should be helping you with the process of going to the cloud, and underneath I have the plan, build, run, and I think it's important to remember that the adoption framework that we have and is not a delivery model, but it's more like categorizing all the different cloud topics that you will encounter at some point in your cloud journey. It doesn't mean that we are not agile. You kind of define your projects how you want to operate that. So the Cloud Center of Excellence should make sure that they have best practices around all the different key topics on the cloud side. So each of the projects coming into the cloud, they know exactly what to do. the Cloud Center of Excellence have a whole range of different roles that they need and topics they need to follow, and I listed some of them. So it's knowledge and learning, compliance, security, cost management, and FinOps. It's governance, control frameworks, infrastructure and provisioning. It's DevOps and automation. It's architecture platform, certified service catalog, and an application portfolio. And it's quite a lot of things that needs to be done. And I know that for large organizations, this can easily be handled. But when you're a small organization, it can be a bit more difficult. And there I'm kind of encouraging small organizations to think more, pick the best practices from the Cloud Center of Excellence and implement what you can yourself. And I think one of the key items that should be implemented for small organizations is always think about reusability and always think about how you can automate some of the stuff that you do in the cloud. Large organizations have multiple teams defined for different topics, whereas small organizations have small, more cross-functional people handling the different key areas of the cloud adoption. I think this one, yeah. So I've more or less covered what I've stated here, and you can say that quite often you see that the Cloud Center of Excellence is attached to the CIO office, but in the beginning of Cloud Center of Excellence, we kind of recommend that you kind of make them refer to the overall executive management, so you ensure that the implementation of the cloud is done right across the organization. And then at a later stage, you can switch to a bit more focused as one manager handling it all instead. The way CGI do Cloud Center of Excellence when we help clients, and this approach can be used also if you use other vendors, of course, and the way to do it is having a joint program where you put up a team with external consultants that has done it before, that can help you with all the best practices and the processes, and maybe even they have a library of templates so you can accelerate the process of implementing the Cloud Center of Excellence. But the way we think it should be done is that you kind of set up a shared responsibility where you let the vendor be the consultancy company that knows how to do it. Let them be the lead to begin with, and then slowly over time you'll take over more and more responsibility as you learn and learn to adopt the Cloud Center of Excellence. The goal is, of course, to establish Cloud Center of Excellence in your organization. The governance process needs to be described, the best practices and the foundation of the infrastructure and everything else needs to be in place. And then in the end, the clients should be able to run the Cloud Center of Excellence by themselves. We've defined a 6-step process in terms of doing this. First, the initial step is defining your stakeholders and sponsors for the Cloud Center of Excellence. Then you do an analysis of the organization in terms of finding out how does it fit in my organization to have a Cloud Center of Excellence. Where do I have the right people, the right skills and stuff like that. Then we want to do workshops with you, because when you implement Cloud Center of Excellence, it's not one size fits all approach. Each company kind of needs to find their own structure in terms of the Cloud Center of Excellence, and also structure according to what they think is the most important part when implementing the cloud. So in our workshops, we'll kind of define the scope, we'll define the mandate, we'll define the different scope of the different teams, what they need to be working with, so each of them know what the responsibility will be going forward. And based on that, we kind of help establish the organization, and we help build all the assets that needs to be in place, assets in terms of templates, onboarding procedures, and other processes that needs to be defined. And then it's number 5, we help implementing this. So make sure that the platform is in place, so all the baseline of the cloud platform is in place with all the security setting, all the policies, and the right reference architecture in place. And then we help the first projects going into the cloud to adopt all the guidelines that we've made in the Cloud Center of Excellence. So it makes it easy for each of the projects to go into the cloud, and they don't need to reinvent what is already done once. So, and then in number 6, that's maintaining and making sure that everything is running appropriate going forward, and also that you constantly update your guidelines and based on technologies and so forth based on what is happening in the surroundings. So that's how we approach implementing a Cloud Center of Excellence. So if I go back to this slide and we talk about Cloud Center of Excellence, and we have it as a box to the left, but a Cloud Center of Excellence actually covers across all the different items that you have here. So it's not just doing a Cloud Center of Excellence processes just for the plan side, but it actually goes across all the different areas where you need to govern or make governance around how to do the different stuff. So when if you need to do migrations to the cloud, then of course you need to have the procedures in place in terms of doing application portfolios assessment. You need to have the procedures on how to do lift and shift and whatever you want to do when you do cloud migration. And also when you need to look into how to do the managed services. So the Cloud Center of Excellence goes across everything that you see in your adoption, in this adoption framework going forward. Most clients, as I mentioned before, will actually encounter all of these, more or less all of these topics when they go to cloud at some point. So it's important also to pick what you need to have to begin with when you implement your Cloud Center of Excellence. Some of the topics so you kind of need to do a prioritization and categorization of your topics, cloud topics, when you start your journey. So you focus on that and have that implemented, as Renee also said, with the first projects that goes into the cloud. As the last slide I have, I'm just taking up the slide that Renee also had, why cloud fails, and Cloud Center of Excellence is one of the key areas that can help you avoid these failures, and that's because it actually takes the compliance and security, governance, and the operation in on the one hand, and helps the organization to adopt the cloud in a best practice manner. In the next presentation we will deep dive into the security and the compliance, probably more on the compliance side, but and that's one of the key areas that many organizations are struggling with as we speak. Mikael, over to you. I know that I still have 10 minutes actually, but I think we'll need that time in the next presentation if I'm not.
Could be, but we have a question here, and I think it's a question that is on a lot of people's minds, because it's about Schrems 2 and the Schrems 2 verdict. In your opinion, would you consider that a game changer, and if so, why?
Oh.
It's a big one, I know.
Actually touching on the next topic, so I'm kind of thinking that I will cover that topic in the next presentation together with René. But in certain ways, it's some companies think it's a game changer, but I think I think over time we'll see it's not that big a game changer as such. It's kind of like, it's more like the decisions coming out is kind of like helping us to protect our data a bit better than what we probably would have done before. So of course it's always a game changer in terms of is the technology ready for implementing all these safeguards that needs to be in place going forward, and there's also a bit more complexity going into the different cloud solutions due to all the requirements. But let's talk more about that in the next session.
Yeah, we have a couple of more questions regarding the SRAMs too. So, but we'll put them in the basket for the time being. If we talk about the prerequisites for adopting a cloud framework, which would you consider the most important?
So prerequisites, most important. I think the most important when you because there's so, of course, CGI has an adoption framework, Microsoft has an adoption framework, Google has, Amazon has, and most other vendors that kind of have built up a best practice framework, and I think when you look across them, then I think that the main item that you should focus on is creating the onboarding package for the projects. So you kind of have a package for each of the new projects that you give them and say, follow this. This is where you start. This is how you get up and running. So that's everything from how you get into using DevOps to how to get your access to the different infrastructures that you need to have and so forth. So having an onboarding package is one of the key elements to have, I think.
Okay, that makes sense. I seem to recall you talked about defining a mandate in relation with the organization. What does that entail precisely?
Well, if you look at when I think that Gartner did a survey as well in terms of what makes organizations and Cloud Center of Excellence fail, and that's when that one of the items was on the top items was missing mandates, and we can also see that at some of the projects that we are currently working on where the customer has not really been able to define the mandate of the Cloud Center of Excellence. So we started up the process with the clients, and then it's kind of now we're starting to struggle with, because now it's going into projects, and when the Cloud Center of Excellence comes to the project and says these are the guidelines, these are the onboarding procedures that needs to be followed, these are the framework around it, you need to comply with that, and sometimes not all IT people are thrilled with that, and some of them are challenging that. And if you don't have the right mandate to say this is how it is, otherwise you don't go to the cloud, then you kind of will be struggling with not being able to get a successful implementation across all your projects going forward.
You just can't go ahead at full speed and expect the organization to follow you unless they know why they have to do it and how they can do it. And this ties back to what René discussed before, I think, that remember, for instance, operations. If you forget operations or the line of business that will have to tie into this, then you could be in trouble.
Absolutely.
Okay, excellent. And well, I'm not going to say goodbye to you for now, actually, but I'm going to say hi again to René, because you have a shared presentation now.
Yes, I should be online again, I think.
We read you loud and clear.
Yeah, perfect. So what I will do here is to move into the next part of the presentation, just setting it up in the right way. Just a second. Yes, and the next topic that Jens Christian and I will cover in common is what we call the value of regulatory compliance. So what we are doing here is actually look at, sorry, that was the wrong one. Now we are there. Yes, sorry. As mentioned both in my first session and afterwards followed by Jens Christian, is that one of the main challenges is moving to the cloud is all of what we call the regulatory compliance parts. Of course, that is different from industry to industry, but a lot of this is common no matter what kind of business you are running and what kind of industry you are part of. There are some things that is the same, governed by GDPR rules or SRAMS 2, which will be a main topic during the next part of the session here. So when we look at compliance in broad terms, we call this one bumps on the road or bumps in the road, and that is just to start with a slide here that says that compliance is actually an extremely underestimated topic moving to the cloud. And what you mean what you meet when you work with the compliance, solve the compliance task, is actually that the main target of being compliant is that you can show to your top management, to your board of directors, that we are in control, so that they safely can say yes to the outsourcing that we actually are doing here. And that means that you need to discuss with internal stakeholders, you need to discuss with external stakeholders to be compliant. You need to look at the internal compliance rules that you need to live up to, and external compliance. And the conclusion here, based on the last 3 to 4 years of work from our point, is that the time and resources to secure that you are compliant is deeply underestimated across almost all the projects that we meet. So you can actually say, if you don't have hair, then you will start, and that means that you need to think, how will I handle the challenges that we will meet, because we will meet challenges on the way ahead. This slide here is something that I made together with one of our clients within the financial sector when we started up the compliance journey more than 2 years back. When we started, yes, we had the first project up and running in a proof of concept. We had looked at the technology, and we looked at this from a technology point of view, and then we started, okay, what do we need to handle from a compliance point of view? And how do we comply with the external regulation and the internal regulation? And we started to conduct a lot of meetings with the procurement department, with our architecture board, with security, with GDPR, with internal and external audit and everything. And we ran from meeting to meeting, try to find out what does it mean to be compliant in the cloud when you're in the financial sector. We could have taken the same slide within the life science, and that would just be some kind of other rulings or other regulations that we need to comply, but we would have met the same stakeholders. So after a lot of meetings and trying to, who should make the decisions, who is actually that would put the hand on the hot plate and say, we are compliant, so dear executive board, please approve our outsourcing deal here. That means that we draw this map, and you can see there's a lot of boxes. Behind each of these boxes, there are one or several documents that you need to comply with, questionnaires, the answers you need to answer, documentation you need to create. So this is just a way forward to secure that every project that moves into the cloud follow this process. And that is going back to what Jens Christian mentioned, that one of the main targets for the Cloud Center of Excellence is actually to be able to deliver a compliant package that makes it easy and smooth for the next business-oriented cloud project to move into the cloud, without being the ones that again and again and again must go through all of this. So this is actually quite complex. There's a lot of meetings, there's a lot of time, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done. So how do we turn all of this compliance work into some kind of business value? And what we do here is that there's no doubt about it, and I'll not go through all of these in detail, but just highlight a couple of those. It is that being compliant is actually the license to operate in the cloud. If you're not compliant, you cannot go into the cloud. So you need to stay in control with your outsourcing. That means that you can outsource the task being done, you could outsource the infrastructure, you can outsource the compute, the storage and stuff like that, but you can never outsource the responsibility for being in control. So you need to put up with the processes to secure that whatever, if it's infrastructure, if it's platform, if it's services and applications that you outsource to the cloud, that you're in control. And that is where the compliance work actually makes sense, so that you actually, for instance, just say, you can say, we are compliant, we put our hand on the hot plate, we'll build trust to the customers, and also both internally and externally. And part of that is that you can secure to everything related to GDPR, data privacy. That is part of the compliance journey. So avoid vendor lock-in, so you can move from one vendor to another as part of this. Reduce risk of lawsuits and stuff like that. And all of all, look at the compliance journey that this is actually the foundation for being able to achieve all the business benefits that we want to work with in the cloud. And again, going back to our compliance framework, we have compliance in the part because we want to emphasize the importance of working with compliance, so that has its own box. But as also Jens Christian mentioned, related to building the Cloud Center of Excellence, compliance is something that will never end. It is not a one-time job. You have a huge, not a huge, but you have several tasks you need to go through when you initiate the cloud journey to be secure on the technology vendor, on all your internal processes, on being secure and meet the GDPR regulations. For instance, in the financial sector, you need to meet the EBA guidelines. If you're in the life science, you need to be GXP compliant and stuff like that. So there's different rule settings that you need, best practices you need to follow. So working with compliance is initiated in the plan phase, but a huge part of both the build and the run phase. And everything you do in this is ending up in a control framework that we will cover later on. So compliance is initiated plan, it is a huge part of build, and it will stay when we take run. And what is it then when we talk about compliance? And this is just a timeline that says working with compliance is nothing new. We have been able to do that for all the years we have been existing, working with outsourcing. So whenever you talk outsourcing of something, then you also need to discuss to be compliant. And then this is just a timeline. We could have built others, but just to say that this journey actually started way back in, and also before '95, when EU decided on the Data Protection Directive, moving into the first agreement between US and EU on what we call the safe harbor, that then led to the Schrems II verdict that says that yes, but that is not good enough in August 2011. And then we had the Edward Snowden, and we have the safe harbor, and then we made the new compliance with Schrems II that will be covered in details just in a second. That in 2015 then led to the Privacy Shield agreement between the US that again was said that is not good enough. And then we have the full GDPR package in 18. And actually the Privacy Shield and Schrems II was then decided in July 2020 that is not good enough. So this is just to show you that working with compliance is just to say to be continued. There will come new stuff like this, and then all of these regulations related to working in the cloud and outsourcing will be challenged again and again and again. And we need to follow all of the verdicts to see what is actually, one thing is the guideline we need to follow, but as long as we don't have verdicts in EU on all the topics that is part of this journey, then there's still room for discussion and to be very clear what is actually the expectations. So based on that, I will lead over to Jens Christian on digging into some of the parts of being compliant.
Thank you, René. So as it states here, so regulations are there for a reason, and of course it's there to help you protect your business, your employees, and also your customers. And maybe this, of course, everyone thinks that compliance is a pain in the it's a pain for everyone, but in the end, if something, a disaster happens, then I'm quite sure you will all be happy that you have your guidelines or have your compliance in place. And if you look at to the left, you have some of the regulatory compliance in the EU in regards to the cloud outsourcing or going to the cloud. and to the left, you also have some of all the standards that is available in the markets. It's standards that could be checklists on security, but it could also be guidelines in terms of how you do best practice implementation of your cloud with all the processes that needs to be in place. There's a few of these I want to look into, and of course, if you click on the next, René, then the EBA guidelines is going to be one of them. And the reason why I've picked the EBA guideline and also the GDPR is the next one, but the reason why I picked the EBA guideline is that it's kind of being considered as a best practice, as a best practice for doing outsourcing to the cloud. And it's made for the banking. So EBA stands for European Banking Authorities. But when we look forward and what is happening right now, that we see in all the other verticals, we see that they look to the guidelines that were made for the banking and try to adopt new guidelines for their verticals. And the most recent one was one for insurance and pension that came out with their guidelines, and it's more or less a mapping of the same guidelines that the EBA has for banking. And so I just want to touch upon that just to show what is in that, and then I want to go into the GDPR, and of course SCRIMS 2 is a big part there. If you click next. So if you look at this is an overall in terms of the content of the outsourcing guideline. I'm not going into all the details here, but actually it shows all the different tasks that they expect you to do if you need to do what I call a healthy outsourcing. And it's, even though that you're not in the banking sector, I think it's a good guideline for you to look into what would be your best practices around outsourcing to the cloud. So use these guidelines for getting inspiration in terms of how to build your way of doing things. And of course, for the banks, they need to follow it as it is. And I think one of the key elements that was stated by the Danish FSA was that make sure that you document all your decisions, your assessments that was necessary to comply with the notice on going to the cloud. So and I think everyone should do the same, because if you have a breach, it's always a good thing to have everything documented, so it shows that you're in control of the process that you've gone through, and that it's not by you being sloppy in terms of not doing the right thing. So make sure you document everything. I highlighted 2. Risk assessment has been touched before. I'll just touch quickly on that, and then I'll go in and talk about exit strategy and plan, which I think is really important for everyone to have. If you click again, Aya. So the risk assessment, everyone that goes to cloud should do a risk assessment, and that should make you aware of if you should go to the cloud or if you should stay away from the cloud. If you're going to the cloud, it will also help you to find all the different risks that you need to mitigate and make a mitigation plan around. And it makes you aware of all the stuff that you need to handle, and make sure everything from what data you put into the cloud, what processes I need to have in place, if I need to have third-party countries doing support on my solutions. There's a whole range of stuff that you need to consider when you do that, you will encounter when you do your risk assessment. There's you can use the ISO 21001, which has a guideline in terms of risk assessment, but you can also use an INSA cloud computing risk assessments as a baseline for you to develop your own risk assessment, and there's a range of others in the market. I think the one from EU is actually all the way back from to 2009, but it's still being used quite a lot. So I think it's good work they did back then. So when you go through your risk assessment, you end up with your mitigation plan, and that you will implement as part of the full framework that the Cloud Center of Excellence would adopt towards the different projects. If you go to the next one, the exit strategy and plan. So I've listed here why you should have an exit plan and a strategy around it, and of course when you go to cloud, you kind of need to also make sure that you can leave the cloud again. And there's huge impacts. Let's say that suddenly you lose connection to your servers, and just imagine the impact that will have on your business. And if that's a reoccurring happening again and again, then you need to consider to move out fast so you don't ruin your own business. So having an exit strategy and a plan is kind of like having an insurance. It's something you need, but you hope never to use it. But so many examples are also going, if you start looking in the press, that suddenly, you're right, recently there was a data center that burned down in what's that, last week or the week before, that burned down in France, and all the promises they had in terms of having all the things in place were not there. So if you didn't have a backup of all the stuff you had in the cloud, then you kind of lost everything So you need to have your processes in place. And you also see that it's everything from political changes, like the SCRIMS2 suddenly made changes in terms of you transferring data to the US. And that needs to also, maybe that will open up for you that you have to exit the cloud due to that, because the application and the data you have is too sensitive to have in the cloud. So it's a range of stuff that needs to be in place. When you talk exit strategy, then I think one of the key principles there is having principles around how to exit the strategy with no vendor login, in terms of how you design your applications, in terms of what technologies you're using for the applications and so forth. There's an example of the plan down here. It's similar to what Microsoft has. I think we've added an extra item to our plan, but otherwise you can find that at the different vendors as well, that with guidelines also how to build a strategy and also build the plans afterwards for each of the applications going to the cloud. So if you click in, let's go to the SCRIMS2 with the GDPR, and as Mikael said, there's several questions in regards to that, and I can definitely understand it, because it kind of gives gray hairs to a lot of us in terms of how to handle the SCRIMS2. And the SCRIMS2 verdict kind of decided that you're not allowed to transfer data to the US, and that was Max Schrim, you see over to the right, and his organization, and Max Schrim, he's one of these data privacy freedoms fighters, you can call him, and straight after that, the data privacy shield framework was invalidated. He actually, and the court decision came, he actually came out with 101 new complaints. So as René says, this is a never-ending story, and I guess that and actually the 101 complaints is, I look through the list, and that's actually 101 companies that are complaining about that is utilizing Facebook or cloud analytics on their websites, and I think there was 13 Scandinavian countries on that list as well. So it's not just so it's all kinds of companies that is affected by this. And we constantly, when we look into the news, we constantly see new complaints popping up. I think the most recent I saw was Google tracking too much information on the telephones, and we also had a case that was decided upon in Germany, where they're using a mail tool, mail scripts tool. And that was not allowed, so that's of course companies that are using that needs to close that down. One of the interesting verdicts that came out as well last month was a French court decision. It was a complaint about using the cloud on a that was for a vaccine booking system where they built it in Amazon, and the complaint was that you couldn't use an American cloud company for such a solution. And the problem is, if you just go back to the SCRIMS2, and just before I talk more about the French case, if you look at SCRIMS2 and you talk about data transfer to the US, many say, well, that's not a problem for me, I don't transfer to the US. The problem is that the Americans has an extra law called FISA, which is called Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and it's called 702, and that actually states that American companies are obliged to hand over data to the intelligence services in the US, and that applies both to data that is in the US, but also if they have access to data abroad. And that, of course, opens up for the SCRIMS2 to be a huge problem. And the French case is one of the first cases that came to court, where it actually gives us good directions on what should be done to mitigate that. And if you look to the left, you're in the bottom there, you also have EBA. So the European Data Protection Board came out with some guidelines in 2020, and and those guidelines, it's guidelines, and they had different use cases in that, but it's actually up to companies kind of to interpret what is the additional measures that you need to put in to make sure that you're compliant when you go to the cloud. And the French case was actually one of the first decisions that came out that gives us good directions on that. And the verdict was it was actually dismissed the complaint. And the reason for that was that the company that has made the solution in Amazon, they had the contractual measures in place, and the contractual measures was Amazon had to notify if someone needed requested access to data, and they had to take it to court to challenge that request. Then they also had, on the technical side, they had encryptions with their key located at a French provider where Amazon didn't have access, and then they had also limitation of data in the cloud, so it was actually deletion of data every third month, and they didn't have any health-related data in the cloud as well. And the court decided that that was enough safeguards to say that was compliant, that solution. And I think over time we need to follow the different decisions coming out based on the complaints, and based on that we kind of need to adjust our directions in terms of what safeguards needs to be implemented on our cloud. If you go to the next one, man. So here is some examples of mitigations you could do. I'm not going into details in regards to them, but it actually gives you an idea of, and I think it's some of them you can find also in the recommendations from the European Data Protection Board, and it's in contractual, it's organizational, and also technical measures. And those are the ones that you need to find out which ones to implement, so you actually think that are sure that you're compliant. And remember to document all your decisions in regards to that. Over to you, René.
Thank you, Jens Christian. And just still looking at this, as stated here, this is a moving target. This is examples, and Jens Christian clearly told us here, we know that we need to follow it closely. We need to look what does each of the verdicts that will come in the coming days, years to come. How is it actually that these use cases that we have from the EVA guidelines, for instance, how is it that the courts are looking at those so we get the clear direction? So we are working with a moving target that makes this extremely difficult. And to talk about this, we'll share what we talk a lot about solving these challenges, let's say, in a shared responsibility approach. So if we look, for instance, here again in the financial sector, we have these compliance drivers, the EBA guidelines, the local Finanstilsyn, or whatever they are called, Schrems 2, GDPR. We have all these compliance drivers, and then we have the Shared Responsibility Act, the ISO 27017. And that together actually gives a clear direction on the split of responsibility and how we share that. And that means that the cloud provider that you select must come up with defined safeguards within processes, within their technical solutions, and within the governance that organizations that they must give to you, so that you can evaluate how are they good enough for us? Are we still in control based on it? Can we actually answer to all of EBA guidelines related to the cloud provider? So that is what the cloud provider must come up with. Then from a client point of view, you need to look at the same to see what are my manual and automated processes? What is my technical solution? What is my governance organization that to work together with the cloud provider, so that I, as a business owner, as a cloud application owner, can go to my board of directors and say, I am in control because I have these processes, I have developed this technical solution, I have this governance and organization in place, and I am actually compliant with all of these regulations. And I can see that my cloud provider that I've chosen, whether it is a software as a service provider, it's a platform, or it's the full infrastructure, I've chosen, they have their processes, they offer their governance structure, they have their documentation that we have access to, and so on and so forth. That is in place. And so what do I say here is that even though that there's a lot of responsibility on the cloud provider, you can state again, never outsource the responsibility. You need to be in control, and this is where CGI, we help our clients as essentially as assistants to build this compliance framework, make the risk assessment, and help with understanding and interpreting the rule settings, both how we can come up with a technical solution and what is it actually that we, let's say, what are the others doing in the across Northern Europe relating to compliance. So this is the way that the shared responsibility. So taking that into account means that we need to look at the risk assessment by a principle of proportionality, and that is actually one of the wordings that say that is not enough. And here we'll come back to a meeting I had with a high-level manager from a financial institution less than 2 weeks back, where he said, if we look at being compliant in a pure binary setting, meaning either we are or we aren't, 0 or 1, black or white, call it whatever you want. If we look at this in a binary way, then nobody is able to go into the cloud. So what is the next best we can do? And that is working with this shared responsibility approach and looking at all the risk and assess them with the principle of proportionality, meaning identify the risk, score the risk, how important are they, and what kind of how effectful is the risk if it occurs. So identify all the risk that is on our cloud journey, build your risk mitigation plan, and come up with one or several mitigations on each of the risks so that you can show that you're aware of the risk and you know how to handle the risk. And that actually means that you need to build in here. We have just put an illustration on a quarterly business process where you control all the risk, but the risk that you need to handle can be real-time risk, it can be daily risk, weekly risk, monthly, quarterly, half-year, or yearly risk that you need to have in your control framework. So what we can say is that in a binary world, we are not able to go into the cloud, but if we work in this in a risk assessment by principle of proportionality, then we have done whatever we can to be prepared when the risk occurs. So looking into this, build a compliance control framework, find out how you will do it, look at the best practices, challenge yourself with whatever you find in related to the external authorities related to the industry you're in, look at the industry good practices that you have, examine the GDPR, look at the processes, the people, the operation security, the technology, the contracts, and find the risk you have and build them into your control framework so that you revisit the risk again and again and be ready when the risk occurs, have the plans, the processes, the resources, the skills ready to execute. So how do we actually close this gap? Again, we have and that is actually not by purpose that we only have 6-step processes, but that actually gives quite a good number here. So we have built this to help clients with closing the compliance gap. And again, outsourcing it, we have been done that for years and years. So from an outsourcing point of view, there's nothing new in that. So we need to look into what do we already have in our toolbox, so we don't try to new event stuff that we just can take. For instance, all of you would probably have a risk assessment model already. Okay, let's take that, look at it, and update it with elements that are cloud related. You have processes related to operations, related to whitelist, new IT together with your IT security department. Okay, let's look at what we have, update it with cloud elements, so we don't need to reinvent everything from scratch. And this process more or less shows us that working structured with the compliance, you can actually turn the compliance work, being regulatory compliant, into a business benefit that makes you secure, that enables you to go to the cloud and harvest all the business benefits that you want to do. I will not go into details, you will get the slides afterwards, but this is actually a clear process on how you can work with the compliance and build your own toolbox, so that, as Jens Christian mentioned, related to the Cloud Center of Excellence, one of the main targets for the Cloud Center of Excellence must be to aim to develop as fast as possible an onboarding package for new business-driven cloud projects, so that they don't have to work with all of these complex compliance tasks again and again and again, but we can help them centralized and do this once and then reuse all the assets, educate the people, secure we have the guidelines, provide the guidance and stuff like that. So back to that, let's close up with why cloud projects fails or what stop clients from getting a license to operate in the cloud. Again, build your cloud adoption strategy, look at the IT strategy, learn from that, align that with the business strategy, and take into account, identify a pipeline of business projects that wants to be icebreaker projects or lighthouse projects or whatever you call them in your settings, and get the sponsors right, get the mandate right, and then start to execute and harvest quick wins. Start together with already today to build your compliance and security setup for the cloud and build that toolbox day by day so that you can harvest the business benefit. Look at the governance part, meaning taking into account how is our internal governance done across our organization, so we get a reference group, we get a steering committee, we get all of this in the right place, communicate often around how the progress is, and invite your cloud vendors in to be part of the governance model, because looking from a shared responsibility approach, we need the cloud vendors to be part of the governance so we are up to date and we can ask them questions and we can get answers fast. Also invite operation in, maybe not day 1, but then day 2, so that they are ready when you have your first cloud projects ready, no matter if it's in a private, public, gov cloud or hybrid cloud setting. You need operations. Things still need to be monitored, things still need to be logged, you still need to be able to document everything, you still need to have your ITIL process framework ready or whatever, how you run your operations. So remember to invite operations within in part of this. And remember that cloud means new ways of working with compliance, with cloud adoption, use cases and everything. And also in this DevSecOps setting where you break down the silos between business, IT, and operations, and build around that setting with working agile in projects where you invite in all the key stakeholders as part of the project. That is a really, really good time to do. So all in all, we think that cloud is not a technology issue, or is it? And over to you on that one, Michael.
Thank you so much. Well, we came across the Schrems 2, like you said and promised, and the thing is, however, that I think we have one more question in this regard that I would like to ask you. Regarding Schrems 2, the judgment and the need for data protection governed by the EU law, what cloud setup is recommended for public sector entities, and B, which geolocations for cloud storage is necessary to remain EU law compliant? It's a big one.
I think that is on your detailed level of Schrems 2. So could you give try to answer that one?
Most of the cloud providers have data centers in the EU, so of course you should go for those data centers, and we also see that even local data centers is popping up. For Microsoft announced that they are building 3 data centers in Denmark. They got an announcement going on in Norway and Sweden as well, and that applies to all the vendors. I think it's just a matter of time then we all have our own local data centers as well. But I'm kind of I think that utilizing the cloud within EU is a necessity as it is right now. Of course, you can always look towards the local vendors as a private cloud, CGI or GovCloud or any others that has built up cloud functionality, and that might give you additional safeguards in terms of your data, because at least then you don't have the problems in terms of Schrems 2 that agencies from the US can request access to your data. But of course, the local authority can access data and request access to your data due to law enforcement. But yeah, there's not a straight answer in terms of how they should do it, because we can see that both ways. The governments are both utilizing local private clouds and also the public cloud. So I guess it's up to the risk assessment to evaluate what is the right direction on that.
Yeah, and if we have to cut this one even shorter, we could say that this is a big issue in the EU, and all the major cloud vendors are very much aware of this and scrambling to be able to make these services available and to make their customers compliant all the way through. So if it's not totally on the level right now, it will be in a very short time. Okay, and another thing regarding compliance, this is very much a moving target, like you indicated, because, well, politicians will be politicians, and you can never quite know how regulations will look 1, 2, or 5 years from now. So how do you evaluate and work with the risk that new regulations can influence your cloud strategy?
Should I give a first try on this one, Jens Christian? This is again back to how you organize and how you set up your governance model. So our recommendation will be that is one of the key tasks that the Cloud Center of Excellence must be asked to handle, and that means that whenever regulations within your industry is changed, that task is given to the Cloud Center of Excellence, and then try to solve that together with your legal department, with your IT security department, or which other stakeholders you have in some of these subgroups that Jens Christian mentioned, that the teams that Jens Christian mentioned in the Cloud Center of Excellence. So again, centralize who owns it when it comes, and then you know how to handle it because you have a process set up for it. So you say, again, it's a new risk, go back to your risk framework, identify the risk, score the risk, put up mitigating actions, and put that into your control framework, and you're up and running again. So,
yeah. If I can add a comment to that, so you need to have an ongoing cycle of controls that you're using to follow up on the different stuff, because you need to do constant evaluations of changes to contracts, changing to technologies, changing to regulations, and so forth and so forth. And you also so you need to build it in as an ongoing planning cycle. All these things that you need to do. Some you do on a monthly basis, others you do on a yearly basis, and it's yeah.
What you say here in CDI related to compliance and security, you need to think build in, not bolt on. So you need to have the compliance security built in your way you work. You should not do this. So you bolt on and take a new topic. So you need to build it in from scratch, from start, in the way you think when you work to the cloud. Not bolt on, build in.
Yeah, and if you work with cloud, it's very much a compliance issue all around, and you know that regulations can change, but you also know that even though politicians like to change stuff, for instance, the EU system doesn't work on a day-to-day basis. Things take time, and you have time to mitigate whatever comes around the corner, because you know it at least a year in advance, usually. So, okay.
If I can comment on that, is that even though that the privacy shield is invalid as it is right now, EU and US are still negotiating how to do that. So maybe there is a new law coming out that will actually solve the problems. And the same applies with the UK after the Brexit. Everyone is saying, okay, then we have the same problem and them being a third-party country or third country. But they just solved that recently, also with accepting that they are aligned in terms of the data privacy there as well. So
yeah. Okay, I have another question coming in here, and thank you for those, dear audience. We love your questions. Data privacy and financial compliance is one thing, but what about regulated safety critical systems like medical, marine, aeronautical, where control moves beyond what happens to data and begins to include who can make changes to the system and under which change management criteria? It's a bit detailed, I know.
Yeah. If I understand the question correctly, then you mean if it's related, for instance, for what we call critical infrastructure. If it's something is mentioned as being critical infrastructure, then the only thing you know is that then the regulation demands, and they are even harder than what we are talking about here. Then there actually will be regulations that say this must never and can never move out of Denmark. So if it is critical infrastructure in broad terms, that is decided by our parliament. Then the compliance rule setting will be even harder than what we have in scope right here. And that means, that is why I believe that Jens Christian is right. If the US-based cloud vendors like Asia, Amazon, Google, and stuff like that, if they want to have full business running in all European countries, then we are pretty sure that in some point of time we can probably have local data centers for all of those in all the EU countries. Or they will be ruled out for being able to handle critical infrastructure.
If I can add a comment to it as well, if you look towards Sweden, they have the Security Act, which also enforces companies to and government institutions to safeguard their data in terms of the same things as that's pretty tough law there as well. But I think they should maybe look towards some of the providers that can actually provide both the public cloud, but also the private cloud in a hybrid setup. So you actually have both of the good of two worlds in one setup. Because I think that going forward, that could be a benefit also in terms of the exit strategies and everything else, that you're able to move fast from the cloud and down to a private local data center.
Yeah, and I think that Jens Christian, that this with looking at private cloud or more even secure, highly secured cloud, if you should call that, to say what is that means that in CGI we have developed infrastructure now where we can offer, for instance, to national banks or to what we call critical infrastructure, to the defense and stuff like that, to run an infrastructure that is highly secured and is run as a private cloud. It still offers a lot of the same services to the clients that you can find in the public cloud, but they are run in a deeply secure environment within the country where we offer these services in Scandinavia.
Okay, excellent. And what you mentioned about the exit strategy, I want to touch down on that one for a second, because like you said earlier, when you enter into a cooperation with a cloud vendor, they will usually state that it is quite easy to take back your data and the processes, and you own them yourselves and all that stuff. And as we all know, the reality might not be quite so simple. So just to take this one again, when should you define an exit strategy, and how would you easiest go about doing it?
You should always create an exit strategy, and you should always have a plan in place. Unless you're a small vendor there where you put an application up there that doesn't have, but if you're putting critical applications in the cloud that is business critical, then you need to have a strategy how to get out of it again. There's you can think of so many things that can go wrong, and you can't predict it. It's like having an insurance, as I said. I never had a fire in my house, but I don't know what happens tomorrow or later today. So I kind of need to have the insurance that enables me to move out of the cloud going forward.
You don't just have to believe; you have to make sure, basically.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It can kill your business if you don't have it, and you can move fast out.
Excellent. I can see we are running a little bit out of time, so unless you have something to add to this, and again, thank you to the audience for the great questions. I would like to round up a little bit. So as we have learned, it is essential to formulate a framework for how to implement your cloud strategy and to map and to manage the risks associated with this project. It is, however, even more important to have compliance in mind and to formulate an exit strategy, to plan for the unexpected, basically. Even though the cloud vendors might say this is the easiest thing on earth, you have to make sure you don't just have to believe. Furthermore, a very large part of the success or failure of your cloud strategy depends on defining a mandate within the organization. If the organization don't know what you're doing or why, the effort might be for naught. It is, for instance, especially important to keep operations in the loop and to make sure that it is possible to implement and manage the cloud solutions. Later today, you will receive a link to the slides from today's webinar and to a recording of the webinar in case you missed something, or if you want to revisit some of the presentations. Likewise, you will receive a link to an evaluation that will make it possible for us, if you fill it out, and we kindly ask you to do so, to make these webinars a bit more interesting in the future. It just could work. Last but not least, I'd like to thank you in the audience, both for your attendance and your questions, and to extend a thanks to Jens Christian and René from CGI for their presentations. So that's it for now, and I hope you all have a great day. Thank you.